Stella Wilson's evening. Stella Wilson was waiting for her husband to come home from work. She cleaned the room, closed the curtains, cooked supper, and lit up 2 table lamps. Every now and then, Stella looked at the clock. She wasn't worried. She just liked knowing that each minute brought her husband closer to home. She had a calm and happy demeanor even when she was sewing clothes. Even though she was 6 months pregnant, her skin looked clear and wonderful. When the clock showed 10 minutes to 8, she began to listen. And just on time, she heard the car tires on the gravel outside, the car door slamming, footsteps, and the key turning in the lock. She set aside her sewing, stood up, and walked over to hug him as he entered the room. "Hello, darling," she said. "Hello, darling," he replied. She took his coat and hung it in the closet. Then she walked over and prepared the drinks, making a strong one for him and a weaker one for herself. Soon, she was back in her chair, sewing, while he sat in the other chair opposite her, holding the big glass with both hands. This was always the happiest time of her day. She knew he didn't like talking much until he finished his first drink, and she was fine sitting quietly, happy to be with him after being alone in the house for hours. She loved being in his presence and feeling the warmth he brought. She loved him for how relaxed he looked in a chair, how he entered a room or moved gracefully across it with huge steps. She loved the focus in his eyes and his ability to remain silent about his tiredness, sitting calmly until the wine had taken some of it away. "Feeling tired, darling?" she asked. "Yes, I'm tired." And as he spoke, he did something unexpected. He raised his glass and finished it in one gulp, even though there was still at least half of it left. Stella wasn't really watching him, but she knew what he had done because she heard the ice cubes falling against the empty glass. When he lowered his arm, he paused for a moment, leaning forward in the chair. Then he stood up and walked slowly to get himself another drink. "I'll get it," she cried, standing up. "Sit down," he said. When he returned, she noticed that the new drink had a deep violet color due to the amount of wine in it. "Darling, shall I get your slippers?" she asked. "No." Stella watched him as he began to sip the dark purple drink. She could see the oily swirls in the liquid because it was so strong. "I think it's a shame that when a policeman becomes as senior as you, they make him walk around on his feet all day long," she said gently. He didn't answer. She lowered her head again and resumed sewing. But every time he lifted the drink to his lips, she heard the ice cubes falling against the glass. "Darling, I made cheese pie for supper. Would you like me to get you some? I haven't made any dinner because it's Friday." "No," he replied. "If you don't want to eat cheese pie, there's plenty of meat and other food in the freezer," she continued. Stella looked at him, her eyes waiting for an answer, a smile, or even a small nod. But he remained silent. "Anyway, I'll get you some mushrooms and sausages," she added. "No, I don't want it," he said flatly. "But you should eat. I'll cook it anyway, and then you can decide whether to have it or not." She stood up and placed her sewing machine on the table. "Sit down." "Just for a minute, please sit down," he said. It was at that moment when she began to feel frightened. The shock. "Sit down," he said again. Stella slowly sat onto the chair, watching him all the time with those large eyes. He had finished his second drink and was staring down into the glass, looking serious. "Listen, I need to tell you something," he said. "What is it, darling?" What's wrong? He became completely still and kept his head down. I'm afraid this might be a bit of a shock to you, but I've thought about it a lot, and I've decided it's best to tell you now. I hope you won't be too upset with me. And then he told her. It didn't take long. Perhaps 6 or 7 minutes at most. She sat still, watching him with a kind of shocked horror, feeling like he was drifting further and further away from her with each word. So, that's the situation. And I know it's not the best time to tell you, but there was no other option. I'll give you money and make sure you're taken care of. But let's try to keep it quiet. It wouldn't be good for my job if there was a lot of fuss. Her first reaction was disbelief, a desperate wish to reject everything he had said. It even occurred to her that perhaps he hadn't spoken at all, that she herself had imagined the entire conversation. Stella thought that if she kept on working and acted as if she hadn't heard anything, maybe later, when she felt more awake, she would find out that none of it had actually occurred. I'll prepare dinner, Stella whispered. This time, he didn't stop her. The decision. As she walked across the room, she felt as if her feet weren't even touching the floor. She couldn't feel anything at all, except a deep, sick desire to vomit. Everything was automatic now. Down the steps to the cellar, turning on the light switch, opening the deep freezer, grabbing the first thing her hand touched. She took it out and looked at it. It was wrapped in paper. She tore the paper away and looked again. A leg of lamb. All right then, she thought. We'll have lamb for dinner. She took it upstairs. As she passed through the living room, she saw her husband standing by the window, his back turned toward her. For heaven's sake, don't make dinner for me. I'm going out, he said. At that moment, Stella walked up behind him. Without any hesitation, she lifted the large frozen leg of lamb and struck the back of his head. The fall, she took a step back, waiting. He stood there for 4 or 5 seconds, swaying, until he collapsed onto the carpet. The sound of the crash brought her out of the shock. Slowly, she came back to reality, feeling cold and stunned. She stood there for a moment, blinking at the body, still holding the piece of meat tightly with both hands. Okay, so I've killed him, she told herself. It was remarkable how clear her mind became in that moment. She began thinking very fast. Being the wife of a detective, she knew very well what the consequences would be. But that didn't matter to her. In fact, it almost felt like a relief. With fear. She was worried about the child. What were the laws regarding murderers who were pregnant? Did they kill both the mother and the unborn child? Or did they wait until the child was born? Stella Wilson didn't know, and she didn't want to take any risks. She took the meat into the kitchen, put it in a pan, turned the oven to high, and placed it inside. Then she washed her hands and went upstairs to the bedroom. She fixed her hair. She touched up her lips and face. She tried to smile, but it looked odd. Her voice sounded strange to her ears. Scott, I'd like some carrots and tomatoes, please. That was better. Both the smile and the voice were coming out better now. The market trip. She practiced it several more times. Then she ran downstairs, took her coat, and went to the market. It wasn't 7 o'clock yet, and the lights were still on in the grocery shop. Hello, Scott, she said to the man behind the counter. Good evening, Mrs. Wilson. How are you? I'm fine. I'd like some carrots and tomatoes, please. She smiled at him warmly and added, "We usually go out on Fridays, but George is tired and doesn't want to eat out tonight. And now there are no vegetables in the house." "Then how about meat, Mrs. Wilson?" Scott asked. "No, thanks. I've got meat. I got a nice leg of lamb from the freezer." "Oh, I don't usually cook it frozen, Mrs. Wilson," Scott replied. "But I'm going to give it a try." "Do you think it'll be okay?" "Personally, I don't think it makes any difference." "Do you want cherry tomatoes?" "Oh, yes. 1/2 kilo of them." "Anything else?" "How about dessert? What are you planning to give him for dessert?" "Well, what do you suggest, Scott?" The man looked around his shop. "How about a big slice of blueberry cheesecake?" "I know he likes that." "Perfect. It's his favorite." After everything was wrapped and she had paid, she said, "Thank you, Scott." "Good night." "Good night, Mrs. Wilson." "And thank you." Returning home. As she hurried back, she told herself that she was simply returning home to her husband, who was waiting for dinner. She needed to cook it well and make it as tasty as possible, since the poor man was tired. She repeated it in her mind like a prayer. Just going home with the vegetables. Mrs. George Wilson, going home with the vegetables on Friday evening to cook dinner for her husband. Do everything right and natural. Keep things absolutely natural, and there will be no need for acting. So she entered the house, smiling. "George, how are you, darling?" she called. She put the parcel on the table and went into the living room. When she saw him lying there on the floor, she froze. All the old love and longing for him welled up inside her, and she ran over to him. She knelt down beside him and began to cry her heart out. It came naturally. No acting was necessary. With the police. A few minutes later, she got up and called the police station. "Quick, please come quickly. George is dead." "Who is this?" "Mrs. Wilson. Mrs. George Wilson." "You mean George Wilson's dead?" "I think so. He's lying on the floor, and I think he's dead." "We'll be right over," the policeman said. The car arrived very quickly, and when she opened the front door, 2 policemen walked in. She knew them both. She knew almost everyone at that station. She went over to Sergeant Albert, who was kneeling by the body. "Is George dead?" Stella cried. "I'm afraid he is." "What happened?" She quickly told him the story about going out to the grocer and coming back to find him on the floor. As she spoke, Sergeant Albert noticed some blood on the dead man's head. Soon more people began to arrive at the house. First, a doctor came in, followed by 2 detectives. Later, a police photographer arrived to take pictures, and a man who specialized in fingerprints also came in. The detectives kept asking her questions. She told her story again, starting from the beginning. How George had come in, how tired he was, how he didn't want to go out for dinner. She explained how she had put meat in the oven and then gone out to the grocer for vegetables, only to return and find him lying on the floor. "Which grocer?" one of the detectives asked. She told him, and he went outside onto the street. He came back in 20 minutes. The search minutes later, the detective returned with a page of notes. There was more whispering. Through her sobbing, Stella caught fragments of their conversation. Phrases like, acted quite normal, very joyful, wanted to give him a good dinner, cheesecake, and impossible that she... After a while, the photographer and the doctor left. 2 men came in to take George's body away on a stretcher. The detectives stayed behind, along with the 2 policemen. They were very kind to her. Sergeant Albert even asked if she would prefer to go somewhere else, maybe to her sister's house or to his own wife's place where she would be taken care of for the night. "No," she said firmly. "I don't want to go anywhere." "Shouldn't you lie down on the bed?" Albert asked. "No, I'd like to stay here in this chair. When I feel better, I'll move." So they left her where she was and went on searching the house. Albert explained that her husband had been killed by a blow to the back of the head, most likely with a heavy object. The murderer might have taken it with them, but it was also possible they had thrown it away or hidden it somewhere in the property. The search went on. She was aware of policemen moving through the rooms, outside the windows, all around the house. It was getting late, nearly 10 o'clock. The 4 men searching the rooms looked tired. Hospitality. "Albert, would you mind getting me a drink?" she asked. "Of course. I'll get you a drink. You mean this wine?" "Yes, please. But just a little. It might make me feel better." He gave her the glass. "Why don't you have one yourself?" "You must be awfully tired." "Please do. You've been very kind to me." "Well, it's not allowed," Albert said, "but I'll just have a drop to keep me going." After sipping his wine, he went into the kitchen. He quickly came back out. "Mrs. Wilson, you know your oven is still on, and the meat is still inside." "Oh dear, I completely forgot," she exclaimed. She went into the kitchen, turned off the oven, and when she came back to the living room, she spoke gently to Sergeant Albert. "Well, you all are trying so hard to catch the person who killed George. You must be terribly hungry. It's long past your dinner time. I know George would never forgive me if I allowed you to stay in his house without offering you food. Why don't you eat up that lamb that's in the oven? It should be cooked by now." "I wouldn't dream of it," Sergeant Albert said. Please eat it. It would be a favor to me if you'd eat it up. Then you can go on with your work afterward." The 4 policemen hesitated, but they were very hungry, and eventually they were persuaded to go into the kitchen and help themselves. The irony, Stella stayed where she was, listening to them talk among themselves. "Would you like some more, Patrick?" "No, I shouldn't. I better not finish it." "She wants us to finish it," one of them reminded. "All right, then. They give me some more." Between mouthfuls, their voices carried into the other room. "The doctor says George's skull was smashed to pieces, just like from a sledgehammer. That's why it should be easy to find. Whoever did it is not going to carry something like that with him. I believe it's right here on this property, probably right under our very noses." "What do you think, Albert?" And in the other room, Stella Wilson began to giggle.